She said it was an accident, but the security camera told a different story. In an age where eyes are everywhere, the truth is rarely hidden forever. Every day, security cameras silently record the moments we think no one is watching. The flash of anger, the raised hand, the desperate plea. They capture raw, unfiltered reality without judgment or bias. And sometimes, these mechanical witnesses become the only voice for those who cannot speak. Have you ever wondered what secrets your neighbors might be hiding behind closed doors? What would the security cameras in your neighborhood reveal if they could talk? That friendly couple next door, are their smiles genuine when they step into their private world? These questions aren't just idle curiosity. They're matters of life and death. Before we continue, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Body Crime. Your support helps us bring these critical stories to light. Stories that might save lives. Comment below if you've ever noticed something off about a neighbor but weren't sure whether to speak up. Now, let me tell you about Nia Caldwell. At 32, Nia was everything society admires. A dedicated mother to young Malik, a community college student working toward a better future, and a cashier who greeted customers with genuine warmth despite her exhaustion. Her neighbors in that modest Midwestern apartment complex knew her as the woman who somehow made time to help others even when her own plate was overflowing. What most didn't see was the growing fear in her eyes whenever her estranged husband Darius came around. They didn't hear the arguments that grew more intense with each visit or notice how she'd begun wearing long sleeves even on warm days. On a cool autumn evening, emergency responders rushed to the apartment complex after a frantic 911 call. They found Nia unconscious at the bottom of a stairwell, her face bruised, a deep gash across her forehead. Standing nearby was Darius, his expression a mask of concern as he explained to officers that she had simply lost her footing during a minor disagreement. A tragic accident, nothing more. His story seemed plausible enough. Accidents happen. People fall. But Detective Marcus Ellison wasn't convinced, and neither was Aunt Loretta, the retired nurse who'd been warning Nia about Darius for years. What none of them knew yet was that a neighbor, concerned about recent package thefts, had installed a modest security camera above their door just 3 days earlier. Its lens had captured the entire incident, not as Darius described it, but as it truly happened. The story I'm about to tell you isn't just about domestic violence or the technology that exposed it. It's about how truth can be manipulated by those with power until someone or something forces that truth into the light. This is the story of how a simple security camera became the silent witness that spoke when Nia couldn't, how a community rallied around a woman they'd failed to protect, and how justice finally found its way into the shadows where abusers hide. This is, she said it was an accident, but the security camera told a different story. Nia Caldwell's life was defined by careful calculation. Every dollar, every minute, every ounce of energy measured and allocated with precision. Mornings began at 5 a.m., preparing lunch for 6-year-old Malik before dropping him at her mother's house. By 7:30, she'd be behind the register at Value Mart, her customer service smile masking the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept more than 5 hours a night in years. Evenings meant community college classes, accounting, her ticket to something better than minimum wage. Classmates half her age complained about assignments while Nia completed hers during lunch breaks and bus rides. Midnight often found her at the kitchen table, textbooks spread out, fighting to keep her eyes open as she prepared for exams. That girl's got steel in her spine, Aunt Loretta would tell anyone who'd listen. At 68, Loretta Washington wasn't actually Nia's aunt by blood, but by choice, a relationship cemented through 15 years of Sunday dinners and late-night phone calls. As a retired nurse who'd seen her share of emergency room visits from women who fell, Loretta recognized the warning signs in Nia's relationship long before Nia herself was ready to admit them. The neighbors at Oakwood Apartments created an informal support network. Mrs. Jenkins from 3B watched Malik when Nia's mom couldn't. Ray from downstairs fixed her car at cost. The community center offered after-school programs that kept Malik safe and engaged until Nia could pick him up. These small kindnesses formed the scaffolding that kept Nia's precarious world intact. But the shadow in this world had a name: Darius. They'd met when Nia was 23, him charming and ambitious, her young and dazzled by attention. The courtship was swift, the wedding small, the honeymoon brief. Then came the gradual shift, criticism disguised as concern, isolation framed as protection, control masked as care. You don't need that college course. We need you here. Those friends of yours just bring you down. Why would you wear that? People will get the wrong idea. The first time he grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise, he brought flowers the next day. The first time he shoved her against a wall, he cried and swore it would never happen again. The pattern established itself with terrifying predictability. Tension, explosion, remorse, repeat. When Nia finally gathered the courage to leave with 4-year-old Malik, Darius's reaction was to become the model ex-husband, helpful, repentant, generous. For nearly 2 years, this facade held. Nia began to believe people could change. Then Darius lost his job. The carefully constructed persona cracked, revealing the same controlling man beneath. The visits to see Malik became longer, the criticisms sharper, the old patterns re-emerging like weeds through concrete. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, a woman will attempt to leave an abusive relationship an average of 7 times before successfully escaping. Nia was on attempt number 3 when autumn leaves began to fall around Oakwood Apartments. "You're teaching that boy to be soft," Darius had said during a visit 2 weeks before the incident. "He needs a father's discipline." Loretta noticed the change in Nia immediately. Phone calls screened, excuses for missed Sunday dinners, long sleeves in September heat. When they finally spoke, Nia's voice was hollow. "He's just going through a rough patch," she'd insisted. "He loves Malik. He's still his father." 1 in 4 women will experience severe physical violence from an intimate partner. 4 black women like Nia. The statistics are even more grim. They're 35% more likely to experience domestic violence than white women, yet 50% less likely to have their cases taken seriously by authorities. "I'm handling it," Nia told Loretta during their last conversation before the incident. About a plan, but some plans never get the chance to unfold. Oakwood Apartments stood as a 3-story testament to 1970s architecture. Brown brick exterior, narrow hallways with yellowed lighting, and stairs that creaked under the lightest footstep. The building housed 26 units filled with essential workers, single parents, retirees, and first-generation college students. People making do with what they had. That evening, October 17th, brought the first genuine autumn chill. Windows cracked open during the day were now firmly shut, and the radiators clanged to life throughout the building. The scent of various dinners, fried chicken from 2A, curry from 1C, spaghetti from 3D, mingled in the hallways. Nia had worked a double shift covering for a sick coworker. Her feet ached, her back screamed, but her mind was focused on the accounting midterm 2 days away. Malik was at her mother's for the night, so she could study. The apartment felt unusually quiet as she unlocked the door at 7:43 p.m., a detail that would later become significant in the investigation. At 8:12 p.m., security footage from the lobby showed Darius entering the building. He hadn't called ahead. He didn't have a key. Someone had buzzed him in, a neighbor who'd seen him so often they assumed he still lived there. Mrs. Jenkins would later tell police she heard Darius knocking on Nia's door. His voice sounded pleasant enough at first, she'd recall. Then it didn't. Inside apartment 2D, the conversation shifted quickly. According to Darius's initial statement, he'd come to discuss Malik's upcoming birthday. He claimed Nia seemed agitated and unreasonable about his proposed plans to take their son camping. She was stressed about some tests, he told officers later. "I tried to tell her Malik needed his father, needed to learn to be a man, not just study all the time like she wanted." By 8:47 p.m., multiple neighbors reported hearing raised voices. Ray from downstairs turned up his television. Mrs. Jenkins placed a concern call to Loretta that went to voicemail. The couple in 2C debated whether to knock on the door, but decided against it, a decision they would question for months afterward. At 9:16 p.m., the arguments moved to the hallway. Darius would later claim this was Nia's idea, that she wanted him to leave but had more to say. Neighbors noted it wasn't unusual for their disputes to spill into common areas, as if Nia instinctively sought witnesses. What happened next formed the core of Darius's narrative, a heated but non-violent discussion at the top of the stairwell. Nia allegedly became emotional and lost her balance while gesturing emphatically. According to his account, he reached for her but couldn't catch her in time. Her fall down the concrete stairs was, he insisted, nothing more than a tragic accident. The 911 call came at 9:22 p.m. Darius's voice sounded appropriately panicked as he described an accident and bad fall. He mentioned that Nia was unconscious but breathing, that there was a lot of blood, and that she needed immediate medical assistance. Paramedics arrived 8 minutes later to find Nia crumpled at the base of the stairs, unconscious, with severe injuries inconsistent with a simple fall: a fractured orbital socket, 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and that distinctive gash across her forehead that would later require 27 stitches. Darius hovered nearby, appearing distraught, repeatedly telling first responders, "She fell. We were just talking, and she fell." As they stabilized Nia for transport, one paramedic exchanged a knowing glance with her partner. The injury pattern told a different story than the one Darius was selling. The bruises on Nia's arms showed distinctive finger marks. The wound pattern suggested multiple impacts, not a single tumble. By 10:05 p.m., news had spread throughout Oakwood. Residents gathered in the lobby, sharing what they'd heard, what they knew, what they'd suspected, but never said aloud. Loretta arrived like a force of nature, demanding answers no one had. If you've ever witnessed something but stayed silent, take a moment now to consider the cost of that silence. Feel like if you believe we all have a responsibility to speak up when we suspect abuse. Comment below with resources for domestic violence victims in your area. You never know who might be watching who needs that information. As Nia fought for her life in the emergency room, the official investigation was just beginning, and it would take one detective's careful attention to detail to discover what the silent witness in the hallway had recorded. Detective Marcus Ellison carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who'd seen humanity at its worst yet refused to become cynical. At 43, his salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses gave him a scholarly appearance that often disarmed suspects expecting a more intimidating figure. Ellison had joined the force after college, motivated not by family tradition, but by a personal mission. His older sister had survived a violent relationship that the system had repeatedly failed to address. That experience shaped his approach to domestic violence cases: thorough, victim-centered, and decidedly unimpressed by the excuses of abusers. "Most people think detective work is about catching people in lies," he often told new officers. "It's actually about creating space for the truth to emerge." When the call about Nia Caldwell came across his desk at 11:17 p.m., Ellison recognized the address immediately. Oakwood Apartments generated multiple domestic disturbance calls each month, though rarely this severe. He arrived at the hospital shortly after midnight, nodding to the officer stationed outside Nia's room. "She's still unconscious," the officer informed him. "Doctors say she has a brain contusion, along with the visible injuries." "And the husband?" Ellison asked, reviewing the preliminary notes. "Ex-husband, technically. He's in the waiting room. Seems pretty broken up about it." Ellison found Darius Caldwell hunched forward in a molded plastic chair, his delivery uniform still on, head in his hands. The detective observed him silently for nearly a minute before approaching, noting the man's controlled breathing, the occasional peek at his phone, the too regular pattern of his distress. Their initial interview lasted 47 minutes. Darius maintained his story with remarkable consistency. A disagreement about their son, Nia becoming emotional, a tragic loss of balance, his desperate attempt to catch her. He volunteered his phone, suggested witnesses who could attest to his character, and repeatedly asked about Nia's condition with what appeared to be genuine concern. To an untrained observer, Darius Caldwell seemed like a man caught in a terrible accident. To Marcus Ellison, he displayed the textbook behavior of an abuser in damage control. The next morning, Ellison began methodically interviewing Oakwood residents. Mrs. Jenkins described hearing arguments at least twice a month when Darius visited. Ray mentioned helping Nia replace a broken door frame the previous year after what she called an accident. The couple in 2C recalled hearing Darius say, "You're not taking my son away from me," just minutes before the alleged fall. Most tellingly, several neighbors described a pattern. Darius would arrive, seeming calm and friendly. Voices would gradually escalate. There would be concerning sounds, then silence, followed by Darius leaving alone. Ellison's suspicions deepened when the hospital called. Nia's attending physician noted injury patterns inconsistent with a linear fall. Multiple impact points suggest either tumbling or separate incidents of trauma. At Oakwood, Ellison methodically recreated the scene. The stairwell was narrow with a solid banister. For someone to accidentally fall over it would require significant force, more than a simple loss of balance balance could generate. The blood spatter pattern showed drops on the wall opposite the direction of the alleged fall. Physically impossible if Darius's story were true. On his third walkthrough of the building, Ellison noticed something the responding officers had missed: a small black dome mounted near apartment 2B's door. It wasn't part of the building's security system, which consisted only of an ancient buzzer and intercom at the main entrance. He knocked on 2B's door and met Terrence Wilson, a UPS driver who explained he'd installed the camera after several packages disappear from the hallway. "It connects to my phone," Terrence explained. "Records whenever there's motion. Stores about 3 days of footage before it loops." "Would it have been recording on Thursday night?" Ellison asked. "Definitely. I get alerts whenever it detects motion." "And would you be willing to share that footage?" Terrence didn't hesitate. "For Ms. Caldwell? Absolutely. She watched my cat when I visited my mom in the hospital. Whatever happened to her wasn't no accident, Detective. That much I know." In the department's digital forensics lab, Detective Ellison and technical analyst Rivera sat before a high-definition monitor. The footage from Terrence Wilson's security camera had been downloaded, authenticated, and prepared for review. The camera's position, mounted at eye level beside apartment 2B, provided a clear view of the hallway and the top portion of the stairwell where the incident occurred. Timestamp shows recording starts at 8:47 p.m., Rivera noted, clicking play. The footage began with an empty hallway, the harsh overhead lighting casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The first movement appeared at 9:13 p.m., Nia's apartment door flying open, Nia backing into the hallway with her hands raised defensively. Her body language told the story. Shoulders hunched, head slightly lowered, palms out, classic defensive posture. She wore sweatpants and a long-sleeve t-shirt, her hair pulled back, no shoes. Her mouth moved rapidly, but the camera recorded no audio. Darius appeared seconds later, following her into the hallway. His stance presented a stark contrast: chest forward, finger pointing, shoulders squared. His face contorted with an emotion that couldn't be mistaken for concern or even anger. It was rage. "Pause there," Ellison requested, leaning forward. "Look at his right hand." Rivera zoomed in. Darius's right hand was partially closed, gripping something small. Her phone, Ellison realized. He took her phone. As the footage continued, Nia could be seen reaching for the device while backing toward the stairwell. Not in a heated argument as Darius had claimed, but clearly attempting to maintain distance. Her expression showed fear, not anger. At 9:18 p.m., the confrontation escalated dramatically. Darius moved suddenly into Nia's personal space. She flinched visibly, backing up until she stood at the top of the stairs. He gestured wildly with one hand while holding her phone out of reach with the other. "He's keeping her from calling for help," Rivera murmured. Then came the moment that contradicted Darius's entire narrative. At 9:19 p.m., after Nia appeared to say something that angered him further, Darius didn't reach out to steady her as he'd claimed. Instead, the footage clearly showed him advancing suddenly, both hands coming up in a violent motion, one striking her chest, the other her shoulder. The force of the dual impact sent Nia backward. Her arms windmilled as she lost balance, her head striking the wall before she disappeared from view down the stairwell. The sound would have been substantial, yet Darius made no immediate move to help her. What happened next proved even more damning. Rather than rushing down the stairs to assist his injured ex-wife, Darius stood motionless for 12 seconds, looking down the stairwell. Then methodically, he moved to the railing and wiped it with his sleeve. He picked up a small object from the floor, presumably Nia's phone, and put it in his pocket. Only after these actions did he descend the stairs, out of the camera's view. 27 seconds elapsed before the 911 call was placed. Ample time for Darius to stage the scene below. When he reappeared in frame at 9:24 p.m., his demeanor had transformed completely. His face now showed appropriate distress. His hands trembled. His body language projected concern and shock, a performance of the arriving first responders. "Play that segment again," Ellison requested, his voice tight with controlled anger. The push. Rivera rewound to 9:19 p.m. Frame by frame, they watched the deliberate assault, the advance, the strike, Nia's head hitting the wall, her helpless backward fall. "That's no accident," Rivera stated flatly. "No," Ellison agreed. "That's attempted murder." The footage continued, showing paramedics arriving, neighbors gathering, the controlled chaos of emergency response. Throughout it all, Darius maintained his act, the concerned ex-husband devastated by a tragic accident. At one point, the camera captured him speaking earnestly to a responding responding officer, gesturing toward the stairs with a reconstructive motion that directly contradicted what they'd just witnessed. He pointed to the railing, suggesting Nia had tripped over it, the exact railing he'd wiped clean of evidence. When Loretta arrived, the footage showed her attempting to approach Darius, only to be intercepted by officers. Her body language, pointed finger, squared shoulders, suggested she'd suspected his involvement immediately. "There's our case," Ellison said, leaning back. Clear, unambiguous visual evidence of assault, followed by deliberate attempts to alter the scene and mislead investigators. The imagery was stark in its clarity, Nia backing away in fear, Darius advancing with intent. The deliberate push, the coldly calculated cleanup, the practiced shift to performed concern. Without this footage, the case might have remained what Darius claimed, a tragic accident during a heated argument. He said, she said, situation complicated by their history and likely dismissed by an overworked system. Instead, the silent witness of Terrence Wilson's security camera had captured the unvarnished truth, frame by damning frame. Word spread through Oakwood apartments like electricity through water. Within hours of Darius's arrest, residents gathered in the building's small community room, their faces reflecting shock, guilt, and resolve. Aunt Loretta stood at the center of this impromptu assembly, a 5'2" force of nature who'd spent the previous night at Nia's hospital bedside. Despite her exhaustion, her voice carried to every corner of the room. "We all heard something. We all saw something. And most of us did nothing," she stated without accusation, merely acknowledging a painful truth. Today, that changes. Mrs. Jenkins tearfully admitted she'd heard arguments, but convinced herself it wasn't her business. Ray confessed he'd suspected the broken door frame wasn't from Alec's roughhousing as Nia had claimed. One by one, neighbors shared fragments of knowledge, puzzle pieces that, assembled sooner, might have prevented tragedy. Guilt doesn't help Nia now, Loretta reminded them. Action does. By nightfall, a rotation schedule ensured Nia would never be alone in her hospital room. Residents took shifts sitting with her, talking to her through her unconsciousness, promising her safety upon return. Others arranged to care for Malik, shielding the 6-year-old from the harsher details while helping him understand his mother was hurt but would recover. The building manager, moved by this collective awakening, installed proper security cameras in hallways and common areas within days. A local women's shelter provided educational materials about recognizing abuse, which residents distributed throughout the neighborhood. When Nia regained consciousness 4 days after the assault, she found her apartment deep cleaned by neighbors, her refrigerator stocked, her son well cared for, and a handmade card signed by every resident of Oakwood. The community that had failed to protect her now rallied to help her heal. Beyond the building's walls, the response grew. Local news covered the story, highlighting the security footage that contradicted Darius's claims. Domestic violence organizations used the case to illustrate how technology could provide crucial evidence in abuse situations. Detective Ellison appeared at community forums, educating the public about warning signs and reporting procedures. Perhaps most powerfully, when Nia was strong enough to return home 2 weeks after the assault, she found the stairwell transformed. Residents had painted over the blood-stained walls, replaced the harsh yellow lighting with warmer bulbs, and hung small framed messages of encouragement along the ascent. "We wanted to reclaim that space for you," Terrence explained as he helped her navigate the steps that had nearly claimed her life, so it wouldn't hold fear anymore. At a candlelight vigil held in the apartment courtyard, over 200 people gathered, not just from Oakwood, but from surrounding neighborhoods. Speakers included domestic violence survivors, advocates, and Detective Ellison, who spoke directly to potential victims in the crowd. "You are not alone," he assured them. What happened to Nia could have been dismissed as an accident, but technology provided what her voice temporarily couldn't: truth and evidence. Their eyes watching, communities caring, systems improving. Help is available. If this story has moved you to action, please share it now. Your one share could reach someone trapped in a situation similar to Nia's, someone who needs to know escape is possible. Leave a comment with local resources for domestic violence victims, and subscribe to ensure stories like this continue reaching those who need them most. The wheels of justice turned with deliberate precision in the months following Darius Caldwell's arrest. Initially charged with aggravated assault, the district attorney upgraded the charges to attempted murder after reviewing the security footage and Nia's extensive injuries. Preparation for trial revealed the systemic challenges challenges faced by victims like Nia. Lead prosecutor Anita Washington, herself a black woman who'd built her career advocating for domestic violence victims, knew the statistics intimately. Black women experiencing domestic violence were less likely to be believed, less likely to receive adequate protection, and more likely to face scrutiny about their own behavior when seeking help. Without that security footage, Washington confided to Ellison, this case might have gone very differently. The defense team initially tried to suppress the video evidence, claiming improper chain of custody and potential tampering. When that failed, they pivoted to attacking Nia's character, suggesting she was emotionally unstable, that she'd provoked Darius, that their relationship had complexities outsiders couldn't understand. These tactics, while disturbing, were predictable. What Washington hadn't anticipated was how thoroughly the security footage would dismantle each attempt. When the defense claimed Nia had lunged at Darius first, frame-by-frame analysis showed her consistently backing away. When they suggested she'd been intoxicated, hospital toxicology reports showed no substances in her system. When they implied the push was reflexive rather than intentional, expert testimony highlighted Darius's deliberate forward movement and the force behind the impact. Most damning was the video showing Darius's actions immediately after Nia's fall. The 12 seconds of inaction, the wiping of the railing, the pocket checking of her phone. These moments, captured with clinical clarity, revealed calculation rather than panic, control rather than concern. For the jurors, many of whom had initially shown skepticism toward what they perceived as just another domestic dispute, the footage provided irrefutable evidence that transcended bias and preconception. They could not dismiss what they saw with their own eyes. During her testimony, Nia Caldwell displayed remarkable composure. Still bearing visible scars from her injuries, she spoke in a clear, measured voice about the escalating abuse throughout her relationship with Darius. She explained her repeated attempts to leave, the financial constraints that complicated escape, and her fears for her son's safety. I stayed too long, trying to protect the image of his father, she testified. I thought keeping our family connected somehow was worth the price I was paying. When asked about the night of the assault, Nia's account aligned perfectly with the security footage, not because she'd studied it, but because she'd lived it. She described Darius taking her phone when she threatened to call her mother, following her into the hallway when she tried to create distance, and finally, the push that sent her plummeting down the stairs. The last thing I remember is his face, she said. Not anger anymore, something colder. The defense's cross-examination attempted to frame the incident as mutual combat gone wrong. The strategy backfired spectacularly when Nia calmly asked if they would like to review the video again, a suggestion that caused several jurors to nod in agreement. Darius Caldwell took the stand against his attorney's advice, maintaining his accident narrative despite the visual evidence contradicting his every claim. His performance, for that's what jurors later described it as, crumbled under Washington's methodical questioning. You testified that you reached out to catch Ms. Caldwell, the prosecutor noted, cueing a freeze frame from the security footage. Yet here, we clearly see both your hands making contact with her upper body in a forward motion. Can you explain this discrepancy? His answer, a rambling explanation about the camera angle being misleading, only highlighted the gulf between his claims and reality. After 7 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a unanimous verdict, guilty on all charges. As the verdict was read, Darius's carefully maintained facade finally shattered, revealing the rage that Nia had known intimately for years. Judge Miranda Colson didn't mince words at the sentencing hearing. Mr. Caldwell, your actions demonstrate not just violence, but calculated deception. You would have allowed MS Caldwell to be dismissed as clumsy, emotional, or accident-prone had technology not exposed the truth. The sentence, 18 years with possibility of parole after 15, reflected both the severity of the assault and Darius's deliberate attempts to mislead investigators. As he was led away, Nia sat surrounded by her support network, her expression betraying neither joy nor sorrow, but quiet resolution. Outside the courthouse, Nia addressed reporters with newfound strength. Justice isn't healing, but it's a start, she stated. What happened to me happens to women every day without cameras to verify their truth. I hope my case helps change that reality. Change came more rapidly than anyone anticipated. Within 6 months, the Caldwell case, as as it became known, sparked tangible reforms throughout the region. The city council approved funding for security cameras in public housing complexes and apartment buildings with histories of domestic disturbance calls. The police department implemented enhanced training for officers responding to domestic violence incidents, with Detective Ellison leading many of the sessions. Technology can't replace human intervention, he emphasized to each class of officers, but it can provide objective evidence when victims aren't believed or can't speak for themselves. Local domestic violence shelters reported a 34% increase in calls following media coverage of the case, suggesting many victims found courage in Nia's story. The district attorney's office created a specialized unit for technology-assisted evidence collection in abuse cases, acknowledging how crucial Terrence Wilson's security camera had been to achieving justice. For Nia herself, healing proved a non-linear journey. Physical recovery came gradually. The headaches subsided, the bone fractures mended, the surgical scars faded to thin lines. Emotional recovery followed a more complex path, with good days interspersed among difficult ones. With assistance from victim compensation funds and community donations, Nia transitioned from cashier to full-time student, completing her accounting degree with honors. Malik, now attending therapy to process his father's actions, showed remarkable resilience, a quality his mother recognized in herself as well. The stairwell at Oakwood Apartments, once a crime scene, became a symbol of community vigilance. Residents maintained their informal safety network, checking on neighbors during disputes and reporting concerns promptly rather than waiting until tragedy struck. Terrence Wilson, whose security camera had changed everything, declined recognition beyond a simple thank you from Nia. "I just did what anyone should do," he insisted. "Saw something wrong and didn't look away." The greatest impact, perhaps, came in the form of conversations in living rooms, classrooms, church basements, and police stations. People discussed warning signs they'd previously ignored, intervention strategies they'd hesitated to employ, and the responsibility of community members to create safety nets for the vulnerable among them. If you've learned something from Nia's story, please subscribe to Mr. Body Crime for more true stories that educate and empower. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply pay attention to what's happening around you. One observation, one concerned question, one security camera could save a life. 3 years after the verdict, Oakwood Apartments underwent renovation. The building's new owner, a development company with a commitment to affordable housing, installed modern security systems, improved lighting, and created a community space named Nia's Haven, where residents could gather for support groups and educational workshops. Nia herself had moved across town, using her accounting degree to secure a position with a nonprofit organization serving domestic violence survivors. She purchased a modest home with a yard where Malik, now 9, could play without the echoes of trauma that had filled their former apartment. Detective Ellison received a promotion to lead the department's Special Victims Unit, implementing protocols that emphasized believing victims first while gathering evidence. The security footage from Nia's case became standard training material for new officers, demonstrating how technology could reveal truth when human testimony was questioned. Darius Caldwell's appeal was denied. His case became a reference point in legal education, illustrating how digital evidence could definitively counter false narratives in domestic violence situations. Perhaps most significantly, 27 states introduced legislation, some calling it Nia's Law, requiring landlords of multi-unit buildings to install security cameras in common areas. Though implementation varied by jurisdiction, the concept reflected a fundamental shift in how society approached domestic violence, from private family matter to public health and safety concern. Aunt Loretta, now in her 70s but no less formidable, continued hosting Sunday dinners where Nia, Malik, and an extended family of neighbors and friends gathered to celebrate their collective journey. These meals became a testament to resilience, proof that communities could heal together when they acknowledged hard truths. The security camera that captured Nia's assault eventually failed and was replaced with a newer model. The original now sits in a glass case at the city's Criminal Justice Museum, alongside a simple plaque reading, "Sometimes justice depends on who or what is watching." In the end, Nia's story reminds us that truth often hides in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to see it, capture it, and bring it into the light. Behind closed doors, alleys and in shadowed stairwells. Countless stories like hers unfold daily. The question is not whether these stories exist, but whether we are willing to bear witness to them.